Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by ExpressVPN and Daylight. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, we had so much fun and spent so much time on just a handful of utility apps a few weeks ago. I mean, I don't even remember how many weeks ago it was now, but a handful of weeks. That we want to do that again and go through some more of our favorite utilities, because I think if there's one category that you and I both have tons of apps in and have lots of things that we use for very particular purposes, it's this sort of utility app.
Yeah, we just couldn't help it. We just needed to mention a few more. I think this is my favorite kind of apps, just because it's so fun to, when you have a specific problem, you can just open the App Store and start searching. And I know that App Store search, still not great, still not perfect. But every once in a while, when I have a specific problem that needs to be solved with like a specific utility, I can just open the App Store or browse by category and I can find what I'm looking for. And one of my examples today, as I will talk about in a few minutes, actually happened exactly this way. Like,
oh, really?
I was looking for something very specific and I opened the App Store and I started searching. And I can tell you, to my surprise, I know it's kind of terrible maybe, but I discovered this app through a search ad on the App Store.
All right. Well, see, there it works.
Sometimes they actually work. So
well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, that was money well spent by that developer. You got to let me know when we get to that one. Yeah, I feel the same way as you do. And it's, sometimes there are just these hidden gems out there too that you don't necessarily know about, or you maybe ignored the first time somebody mentioned them because you just didn't have that need. But who knows? Hopefully we have some here that some of our listeners will need. So I want to kick things off with a Mac app, and that is RetroBatch from Gus Mueller. And Gus Mueller, he runs Flying Meat Software, and he's the maker of Acorn, which is an image editing app. And RetroBatch is kind of related in that what it does is hardware-accelerated batch processing of images. So it's using things like the Metal frameworks to do this stuff super, super fast. And what I really like about this app is that it works very much like Audio Hijack, which is one of my favorite apps from Rogue Amoeba, because what it does is you basically use nodes to build a chain of actions that will be applied to the images that you pick. So all you really need to do is you take a folder full of images and you drag it onto the canvas in RetroBatch. And then you look at the library of actions that can be applied to them, drag some of those in, depending on what you need to do. And then you have a target folder and place them on the canvas next to each other, and they snap together with little lines to show you what's going to happen. You can get a preview in a pane to see exactly what's going to happen with what you're doing. And it works just lightning fast. What I like too is that, and what's very unique about this compared to, there are a lot of batch processors for files and images and things that you can get on the Mac App Store and elsewhere. But RetroBatch isn't just sequential. You can run these things in parallel. So if you have like some kind of really complex workflow, RetroBatch can do that. And because it's hardware accelerated, it works exceptionally quickly. I don't have a ton of uses for this, but probably one of the best examples is that when we do the Club Mac Stories anniversary each year, we usually wind up with, I don't know, maybe 3-4 dozen deals from different Mac and iOS developers that we have for members. And usually what we've done in the last 3-4 years is we've created a graphic that incorporates the icons for all those apps. And first of all, collecting icons for a bunch of different apps can be a little challenging in and of itself. I mean, sometimes I do that through the iTunes Search API. Sometimes I just pull them right out of the app bundle on the Mac. Whatever it happens to be, though, I usually wind up with icons that aren't all the same size. It makes it very hard to lay them out in a nice, even grid. So what I do is I just take a look at what I've got. I pick a kind of the smallest size one that I have as the size that I'm going to reduce everything down to. And I just pick the width and I resize everything to the same width so they fit really nicely in a row on a grid when I prepare the image. And doing that all at once instead of like opening them one by one in something like Preview or Pixelmator or whatever it might be, or Acorn for that matter, and resizing them one by one when you've got, 30, 40 images, it saves just an immense amount of time. I just have a folder, I have a resize action, which has a bunch of different parameters that can be set on it. And for me, in this particular project, it was just setting the width to a fixed width and then scaling them proportionally. And then I have a results folder. And so, I can preview it all in advance, see what it's going to look like. And then I can open up the folder after I've processed everything and I've got all the images I need ready to lay out in an image editor. There are two different versions of this app. There's a regular version that's $30, but then there's a pro version that's $50. And the main difference is that the pro version has a bunch more actions that you don't have in the regular version. It can do things just to give you kind of an idea of exactly what is going on and what kind of actions you can take. Is you can do things like edit the metadata, you can add watermarks. There's all sorts of file transformations. As I mentioned, things like resizing, rotation, cropping, all that kind of thing, as well as converting formats and, color profiles, adding effects and filters. And then you can even do, which is really cool. I mean, I know Pixelmator does something similar. You can actually use a machine learning algorithm to identify the images in the folder. So it'll pick out, dogs or cats or whatever it happens to be. It's pretty cool how that works, and it works fairly well. So if you have lots of images that you need to process in some way, this is an app that's definitely worth taking a look at because it's just absolutely fast. And even though I don't need it more than maybe 4 or 5 times a year, it really pays for itself because it saves me a lot of time.
That sounds exactly like the kind of app I would love to have on my iPad Pro.
Right. Yeah, that would be a great one.
It sounds like a combination of Acorn and shortcuts all bundled up together. Like, it sounds so amazing. It's too bad that I don't like dealing with screenshots on my Mac. But yeah, this would make a lot of sense on the iPad Pro, and I'm kind of jealous. I wish that I had a use for this.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Daylight. So what is Daylight? Well, it's a small business CRM and project management app for both the Mac and iOS. Daylight is different than most CRMs, though, and that's a really good thing. Unlike other web-based CRMs that focus on customer relationships and sales, Daylight takes you further by going through the entire customer cycle, from closing a deal to finishing a project. What's awesome about Daylight is that it does the heavy lifting, so you and your business just keep humming along. One of the hardest things about a big project is to ensure that things don't slip through the cracks, and that's exactly what Daylight can help you with. It's like having project management superpowers. The app reminds you when to follow up with people, and it organizes all the moving pieces of both internal and client projects. It even streamlines your processes so your team follows exactly the right steps every single time. Daylight also syncs across all of your devices, both the Mac and iOS, so everything's always up to date and with you. And it integrates with Apple's calendar and contact systems, so that information is always right there at your fingertips. And on the Mac, it even integrates with Apple Mail, which is a feature that's coming really soon to the iOS app as well. There's even the ability to leverage Daylight as part of your automation workflows because Daylight works with Zapier. That means you can hook Daylight into things like MailChimp, Slack, Acuity scheduling, and many more apps. Daylight even works offline. Staying on top of big projects is tough. Make it easier on yourself. Win more business and get more done with Daylight by visiting marketcircle.com to learn more, sign up, and give it a try. There's a 30-day free trial, so there's nothing to lose. Again, that's marketcircle.com, where you can learn more about Daylight, win more business, and get things done. There's a link in the show notes, too. Our thanks to Daylight for their support of App Stories.
Okay, so my pick is so much simpler. I kind of feel bad
Oh, no.
compared to yours and your crazy image automation workflows and machine learning stuff. Mine is a GitHub client, but it's not like Working Copy, which is my actual GitHub client that I use to push documents to my repos and to collaborate with other users. I was looking a few months ago for a GitHub app for iOS that will focus on the news aspect of GitHub. I wanted a utility that would allow me to easily follow my favorite repos and see new commits, new issues, new status updates, like a way, like I was looking for like a Twitter client, but for GitHub.
All right.
I want to have a stream of updates from, for example, I follow the Homebridge repo,
Right.
where the developer posts, new versions of Homebridge, or like I wanted to see issues submitted by folks who also use the same plugin that I have for adding HomeKit support to my WebOS TV. Like I wanted a way to stay up to date about new versions of Homebridge plugins and all these other things that I use, because I realized, I often go like in several weeks or even months without updating all of these packages that I have installed on my Mac Mini. And the reason that happened was I just forgot. I just didn't have, I don't want to go to GitHub via Safari and open the, go to the stream, to the update stream page. Like I always forgot to do that with the browser.
Right.
And I think it's easier once you have an icon on your home screen, it's easier to remember. So as I mentioned, using App Store search, I came across Grape. And Grape is a GitHub client that focuses on the news aspect of following repos. So there's a main tab where you can see all of the updates from the repos that you follow, and it's called the News tab. And you can see issues, you can see pull requests, you can see comments, you can see all of this information, and you can tap through on the linked comment or repo or issue, and you will get this responsive view. I'm not sure if it's a combination of like a web view that is optimized for iOS, but it kind of looks like the GitHub website, but reformatted for the iPhone screen.
All right.
It looks real clean, really polished, and you can, of course, add your own comments. There's a visual text editor that allows you to add lists or formatting, or like you can preview what your text is going to look like. It's really well done. I never do this myself, but you can also see all of the trending repos and trending developers across the entire GitHub community. And of course, you can also search for users and repos manually. But what I like is that you can go to the profile tab where you will see like statistics for your account. So in my case, I have 110 followers. I don't know why. And I'm following 4 developers. But most of all, I can get quick access to my 18 starred repos. So I can, I follow, for example, all of these are a bunch of Homebridge plugins, really.
Sure.
But there's also a few AppleScript stuff, a bunch of things from our own Brett Terpstra. And you can tap through on a start repo, and you get access to this, again, a responsive version of what you would see on the GitHub website. The initial README page,
right,
with the presentation of the project, images, description. You get all of that, but reformatted for the iPhone. So I think it's some kind of web view wrapper, but it does not feel terrible to use. I think that's the best way that I can describe it. I think there's some web component here, but it's not ugly and it's not terrible. And the performance is pretty good. You can submit new issues, and I've done this myself, both from the iPhone and the iPad, because Grape is universal. You can watch, you can fork, you can share all of the actions that are supported by GitHub. You can do them with Grape, and there's even working copy integration. So if you find a repo that you're interested in, you can clone through working copy from Grape, and doing that will basically launch working copy and clone the repository from GitHub. So it's really neat that, you can have 2 separate GitHub clients on your device, but one of them is for actually managing repos and the other is for discovering them and following them. And I really like the approach.
I like that a lot too. That's an interesting way to do it. There are a lot of apps that are starting to support working copy. It's really taken off.
Yeah, it's really cool to see, especially because Anders, the developer of working copy, has always been at the forefront of adopting automation, adopting all of the modern iOS APIs. And I think that's paying off, because I constantly see all of these app updates saying, and we added support for working copy.
Right.
Because working copy, they know that it supports open in place, it supports X callback, it supports series shortcuts. So it's a safe bet to integrate with working copy, I think.
It is, and it's an exceptionally good way to spread the word about working copy too, right? Because it's just so easy to use from other apps. People discover it via things like Grape.
Yeah, exactly.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by ExpressVPN. We can probably all hold up our hands and admit it. Cybercrime is something we think happens to other people. Because who would want your data, right? The bad news is that stealing data from people like you and me using public Wi-Fi is one of the simplest ways for hackers to make money. If you leave your internet connection unencrypted, your passwords and credit card numbers are vulnerable. But there's something you can do to protect yourself from cyber criminals. Start using ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN works by securing and anonymizing your internet browsing. It encrypts your data and hides your public IP address with easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background of all your devices. You can turn on ExpressVPN protection with just one click. Then you're free to safely surf on public Wi-Fi without being snooped on or having your personal data stolen. ExpressVPN has been rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar. It even comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I've been spending a lot of time in downtown Chicago on public Wi-Fi and traveling recently. And whenever I do, I enable ExpressVPN because you never know whether it's a coffee shop or an airport Wi-Fi system, whatever it is, you never know who might be looking at your Wi-Fi traffic if you're on a public Wi-Fi network. So I always enable it. And you know what's great about it? Once you enable it, you don't even know it's there. It's fast, it's reliable, and it just fades into the background, protecting you, which is exactly what I like. For less than $7 a month, you can get the same ExpressVPN protection that I have. If you ever use public Wi-Fi and want to keep the bad guys away from your data, you need ExpressVPN. So go to expressvpn.com/appstories to learn more. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/appstories. Again, that's expressvpn.com/appstories for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for their support of App Stories. Okay, so my second pick that I want to raise is Gladys, and we haven't talked about Gladys in a while. Personally, my day-to-day shelf app, both on the Mac and iOS, is Yoink. But I still use Gladys, and I feel like this is maybe one of those situations where it's like I'm using 3 or 4 different task managers all simultaneously. I heard you.
Are you? Are you at the moment?
No, I'm not. I heard you and Mike talking about this on Connected recently.
Mike is. I'm not. Look, Mike is using Todoist and things, and I don't know.
I understand. You were talking to Mike, though. That's all I'm saying, Federico. No accusations.
Well, you have a reputation, is what I'm saying.
Oh, all right. I am not using multiple task managers yet, but I am using multiple shelf apps. Okay, and the reason I'm still using Gladys too is that I use it for more intermediate type things that I'm storing. Yoink is really good, especially on the Mac. Things that you drag into it just sit off to the side until you navigate to the folder where you want to drop them or an email or whatever it is. But it's really designed to be very quick, and things aren't really designed to live in Yoink. At least that's not how I use it. And so when I have something that I want to park for a longer period of time, maybe it's a couple of days, maybe it's a couple of months, I'll drag it in Gladys because, for instance, we talked not that long ago about some of our workflows, and I was describing what I'm doing with sponsor workflows on the Mac. And I've been trying to move more of that over to iOS. And one component of that is some of these documents and checklists and things that I send to people over and over again. I put them in Gladys, and then I label them with sponsor so that I can sort and just see the sponsor ones, not everything that happens to be in Gladys at one time, and easily attach that to an email, whether I'm on my iPad or I'm on my Mac. It's a great way. It's kind of like a super shallow file system of things that I just need to have handy and get to quickly on a regular basis. I'll also put things in there sometimes I'll find something that I want to send to you, or I don't have time to deal with it, so I'll park it in Gladys and maybe deal with it in a day or two when I have more time. Or I find interesting links, and I'm not really sure, is this something I want to write about on the site, or is this research for a bigger project? And it's just a good parking ground there for leaving it there for a few days. Now, Gladys, we talk about it a lot on iOS. We've written about it a lot on Mac Stories and Club Mac Stories. But the Mac app is really good too, and has really most of the same features that you'll find on iOS. You can do things like on both of them, like add notes, add labels, add tags. You can see information in all sorts of different varieties. So you can see an image, you can see the URL for the image, you can see the data blob for the image. All that exists on both platforms. And one reason that I like that so much is, first of all, most apps today, I'm not going to go near them unless I have a solution on both the Mac and iOS. And so Gladys fits that bill, and that's great. The other thing is that with betas, the betas we've been testing, especially like 12.2 right now on iOS, handoff just stopped working for me again. It was working so well for so long. And I love that with Safari, especially when I find something on my Mac or on my iPhone and I want to move it somewhere, because we have so many shortcuts built around that for things like the newsletter. And when that happens, I use Gladys a lot of the times now, because Gladys has incredibly fast and reliable iCloud sync, which that to me is probably the base level thing that makes me use it more than anything else, because I know that if I send something to Gladys, whether it's on my Mac or iOS, it'll show up everywhere almost instantly. And so that's what I'm using it for these days.
That's pretty cool. I haven't also used Gladys in a while, but I think, it was one of the first apps to really take advantage of the drag and drop API on iOS and to show you all the different data types that a single item can contain. And I think Yoink also took advantage of that after, but Gladys was the first one.
Right.
And I think having a version available on the Mac really adds value to the fact that you can save stuff from iOS, but then you also see it on the Mac. That's very cool. All right. So my second pick is something that I discovered thanks to Ryan on Mac Stories. He reviewed this app a few months ago. It's called Sofa. And Sofa is an iPhone utility to keep track of the media you would like to consume in the future. So by media, I mean books, movies and TV shows, music albums, podcasts, and video games.
Right.
And if you're anything like me, you come across all of these different types of content every day. There's we live in an age where there's just so many TV shows and movies and books and video games that you wanna check out eventually. And I always found it hard to keep track of all these things. So the idea behind Sofa is that you can create collections for different types of media, and you can easily add new items because the app integrates with online databases like the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store, or there's a video game database that I don't remember its name. But the idea would be you don't have to just have like a plain text list of all these items. You can actually have pretty collections that contain previews for each item with like the cover artwork or a description or a release date and all that kind of stuff. And so I created multiple lists for books, TV shows, albums, and video games. I didn't create one for podcasts because when I discover a podcast, I just added to my Overcast account. So right now, for example, I have been reading the Red Rising trilogy. And for each of the books, I previously added to Sofa in the books category. And as soon as I finished reading one, I would check it off in Sofa. And when you check off an item from Sofa, it goes into your activity summary. So the idea would be that at the end of the year, I should be able to go to the activity page and see a log of all the media that I've consumed. I know that consumed is a terrible verb, but it gives you the idea,
right,
of what you're doing with Sofa. So there's a few things that I would like this app to have, but doesn't have yet. First of all, of course, an iPad version. it would be great to have access to this stuff on the iPad, because I use my 11-inch iPad Pro to read books and watch movies or play iOS games. And it would be perfect to have access to the iPad as well with iCloud Sync. Also, I wish it was possible to have Siri shortcuts, to have previews of one specific collection outside of the app. So like I would be able to ask Siri to say, show me the video games I want to play or stuff like that. And also I would like to have a Siri shortcut to add something to a specific list. But really, I think what's missing from Sofa, even more than Siri shortcuts and an iPad version, is a share extension that lets you add items from outside of the app.
Right.
Right now, every item you need to manually search for and add from the Sofa app on the phone. I would like to, for example, if I'm on the App Store and I want to add a game to my collection, I want to just be able to share that game and add it to Sofa via an extension, or same with the Apple Bookstore. Or, maybe I'm on a Wikipedia page for a video game and I want to add that video game to my collection. And I feel like it would be so much nicer. And I understand why the developer hasn't done this yet, because it adds complication and in terms of what app are you using to share this item, what language are you using in your browser, and all that kind of stuff. But I think, especially for apps like iTunes Store, Apple Music, App Store, and the Apple Bookstore on the iOS side, it will make so much sense to have something in the share sheet to add an item to your collections. But yeah, I've looked for these types of apps on the App Store for months, like a media manager or a wish list manager. I don't even know what to call them. And most of them are either ugly or like I'm just being honest, they're just ugly, or they don't have visual previews, whereas I really wanted to have something that was visual and nice to look at, or they are like database oriented type of apps. Like
right,
you can create a database for all the things, and I don't want to create a database. I don't want to have all that overhead. I just want a pretty list with media previews.
Right, and there are other ones that are kind of single purpose too. There'll be good ones for movies, but it might not include books or video games.
Yeah, exactly. So this one does it all, but I wish if the developer is listening, I don't know, but iPad version, share extension, and if you really want to put the cherry on top, Siri shortcuts, and it would be perfect.
I have a very small request. I've been using Sofa a little bit too, and I kind of would like the thumbnails in the app for the lists to be customizable, because right now I think it just picks the image from the oldest item that you added that's still in your list. That's a really small thing.
I think that's right. I think, that's a good observation though.
I think that's how it works. And, I personally would actually like to see apps add to this. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it will make a lot of sense to have apps. In fact, I was surprised that it's not part of the supported media types, especially because with the iTunes API, you can have artwork, you can have descriptions, you can have links. So it should be... Is the wish list gone from the App Store?
I think it is.
I think it's gone. Like the App Store doesn't have a wish list anymore. So there you go. Would make perfect sense because the App Store doesn't have a wish list anymore.
All right. Well, those are 4 great utilities. I think that's a great collection that people ought to check out. I want to thank our sponsors again for today's episode. That's ExpressVPN and Daylight. And of course, you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net and Club Mac Stories. You should check that out as well if you haven't before, because we do some pretty cool stuff over there as well. You can find Federico over on Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.